I want to add the two fractions, 11 over 100 plus 20 over 150. How will I do that?
Common denominator?
I need a common denominator. What is the common denominator?
300.
Okay, good. So the easiest common denominator is actually to go and multiply these guys together, the two denominators. That's 15,000. That's way too big. So what we are actually looking for is something much smaller to make the math easier, and the common denominator is 300. How do we change the fractions that they gave us originally to fractions with denominator of 300?
Multiply them by?
The missing factor. So what factor is missing from 100 to make it a 300? That's a 3. So you're going to multiply also the numerator by 3 and you will get 33. And what happens to the 150?
By 2.
It's missing a 2. So you're going to add this. So the answer is going to be 73 over 300. Now, if you were able to see the denominators broken into prime factors, you would have noticed that 100 is 2 times 5, that's a 10, and 2 times 5, that's another 10. And 150 is 3 times 5, a 15, and a 2 times 5. Your common denominator is 3 times 100. 2 times 5, 2 times 5. What do you notice? You notice that 300, which is the third group of factors, includes 100 in it. So this part is the 100. And it also has the extra 3 that you needed to multiply your first fraction with in order for you to get 300. Alright? So this 3 is this 3 that you added. The same thing happens to the 150. What happens to the 150? 300 contains 150. It is 3 times 5 times 2 times 5. And it also has an extra 2. And that was the 2 that you used here to multiply by to make it 300. Correct? Okay, so how does this apply in algebra? You need to know the factors of both your denominators, or if you have 5 denominators, all 5 of them. So your first job is to factor them. The denominators only. We don't care for the numerators because you have to do math in the numerators anyways. So, how can we factor the first denominator? We will use the AC method. A minus 10 and a plus 5, and the other denominator is already factored because it's not squared or anything.
So they are, if they're like that, they're already factored. If
Yes.
they're not squared, no matter what.
Yes.
Okay.
So your prime factors are usually of degree 1. So your parenthesis here on the left were a minus 10. There is nothing else you can factor there unless there is a common factor. If you had 2a minus 10, you would have factored the 2 out. Alright, so these are your two denominators. The one has a factor a minus 10 and a plus 5, and the other has the factor a minus 10. The question is, what factors are in your least common denominator? The answer is, every factor you needs to be in the least common denominator. So what's that going to be? I need a minus 10 because it's a factor of both of my denominators. I also need a plus 5 because it's a factor of one of my denominators. If it isn't 1, it has to go in the least common denominator. Your next job is to change those denominators into the least common denominator. The denominator on the left, though, is already ready. So you would multiply it by 1, and then you will multiply the top by 1. So the top is going to come out to be 8a minus 7. What happens?
Multiply that by a plus 5.
A plus 5. And then you will multiply this by a plus 5. So here in the top you will have a plus 3, a plus 5. So your next step now is to see if you can factor the numerators and simplify if there are any common factors. We don't know if there are any, but we will find out. So I'm actually only going to work on the numerator for a minute to see if I can factor that. It says 8a minus 7 plus 3a plus 15. This is 11a plus 8, nothing to factor. 11a plus 8 over a minus 10, a plus 5. Yes? Now, if for some reason you did your math and what you ended up with was here a plus 55, you would factor an 11 in the numerator. So the numerator in factored form will be 11, a plus 5. And then you would be able to simplify. What would you simplify?
Take out the a plus 5.
You would cross off the a plus 5 because it is a common factor, and your final answer would be 11 over a minus 10. If that's what your numerator gave you, which is not the case. Everybody, yes?